both the activity main.xml and main activity.java files should be opened. Let's check and see if that's the case. So now we're here, and activity main.xml is there, which rendered the hello world in the middle of the screen. And in main activity is your Java class, your activity class, that also got created for you automatically, that by default overrides the onCreate method, which comes from the app.compat activity class, which our main activity extends. So the project window gives you access to all the project files. The app folder contains all the files you'll edit to create your app's GUI and logic. The app's folder contents are organized into nested folders containing files, and the res folder, resources, contains the layout folder, that's the activity main.xml, which is where your activity main.xml is found. The editor window, when you click a file in the project window, its contents are displayed in an appropriate editor window based on the file's type. For XML files that represent a GUI, the Layout Editor's Design tab is displayed by default, and you can click the Text tab to view the XML code. So let's take a look at some of these things we just went over. This is the app folder. You can minimize, maximize it. It contains a manifest folder, a Java, and a res folder. If you expand each one, there's your Android manifest file, which basically ties your entire app together. This package file right there contains your main activity, and then this resources file contains a layout folder. Within that is your activity main.xml, and then you can toggle between the design and the text tabs right here to view either the components or the XML that's rendered by dragging and dropping those components in there. The component tree window. When the layout editor is open in design view, the component tree appears at the right side of the IDE, and it shows the layouts and views or GUI components in their hierarchy. That is, let's see, back in the design tab, component view is right there. It's kind of hard to see. Let me make it bigger. Component tree. This shows you all the components that are on your app. I might have to resize a couple screens in order to see everything out at once. But there's a component tree. It's using a constraint layout by default, and inside it there's a text view, which is right there in the middle. That's the word. It's hello world. App resource files. Layout files like activity main.xml are app resources and stored in subfolders in the project res folder like we just saw. We're going to discuss the drawable layout and values in this lesson, in this chapter. So let's take a look again at the Android Studio. And this may look a little bit different on your screen. They're using this older version of Android in this screenshot, but as you saw on my version of Android, our component tree was left of the screen of the phone screen, and the properties were up here. And we don't have to go by this screenshot. We already saw everything by looking at this newer version of Android Studio 2.3. The component tree is there. The palette of components that you can drag and drop onto the screen are there, like a button. You can drag a button and let go, and there's a button. But I'm going to undo that because I don't want a button there. We already see the screen. This is, I guess, just the rest of the screen. Collapsed window tabs. You can click on a tab to expand the corresponding window. It's just showing you that there's some tabs on the side to look at different screens. But this is our project right here, the project window. In the project window, this shows you your directory structure. If the arrow is pointing to the right, that means you haven't expanded that directory structure. By clicking on it, it'll expand it and show all the subdirectories and files inside of it. For example, here's the Java folder within app. I can click on it to see what's inside, and click this folder to see what's inside there. So some of the other subfolders that we saw in the res folder includes Drawable, and folder names that begin with Drawable typically contain images. And these folders may also contain XML files that represent shapes and other types of drawables, such as the images that represent a button's unpressed and pressed states. Then there's the layout folder, which we already saw, that contains XML files that describes the GUIs, such as the activity main.xml file. And the values folder, it's the folder name that begins with values that contains XML files that specify values for arrays, colors, dimensions, such as width, heights, and font sizes, strings, styles, and these file names are used by convention but are not required. And you can actually place all resources of these types in one file, but it's considered good practice to define the data from hard-coded arrays, colors, sizes, strings, and styles as resources so they can be modified easily without changing the app's Java code. For example, if a dimension resource is referenced from many locations in your code, you could change the dimension values in the resource file rather than searching everywhere the occurrence of that hard-coded dimension value is in your app and having to change it, everywhere. We'll learn more about that in a little bit when we start creating some string resources. Android Studio window continued. So the layout editor that we saw, which is this part of the screen right here, this is your layout editor. We're in it right now. When you see that when the design tab is open, this entire area right here in the middle is our layout editor. When you first create a project, it opens up the app's activity main.xml, and we'll use the AVD, the Android Virtual Device that emulates a Google Nexus Phone 6 for designing Android phone GUI. And the default GUI for a blank page app consists of a relative layout with the white background and text views containing the words Hello World. Relative layout arranges views relative to one another or relative to the layout itself. Actually, in this app, we use an empty activity, and the default layout is a constraint layout. So, every so often, Android has a new version update for Android Studio, and some things change slightly. So, you should be basing this information off of whatever is showing on your Android Studio if you have the latest version. So these PowerPoint slides, although this is a very recent book, you can see how quickly they become outdated. For the welcome app that we're going to create, we're going to change relative layout to a vertical linear layout, in which text and height images will be arranged top to bottom on the screen and will occupy half of the layout's height. A text views displays text, and image views displays an image. For the welcome app, you'll change the relative layout to a vertical linear layout, in which text and an image will be arranged top to bottom on the screen and will occupy half the layout's height. We're just going to work with the default layout that it has, but you guys can mess around with the different types of layouts and get a feel for them. And if you go to the palette and click on layouts, you'll see all the different layout options that are available, and you can use any one of these. And you can if you look at the little image next to the layout name, you can kind of get an idea of how things are going to be arranged on your screen. A text view displays text, and an image view displays an image. The XML for the default GUI, the attribute values that begin with @ are resources of the values defined in other files. By default, the XML editor displays a resource literal value and highlights the values. This enables you to see the resource's actual values that's used in a particular context. So This is a diagram showing the layout editor view of the app's default GUI. It may look slightly different if you have a newer version of Android Studio. It may look more similar to this. So this is a screenshot showing the project's original activity main.xml file. And we'll just take a look at the real XML file that got generated, which is basically this text right here. It looks slightly different than what you'll see in the PowerPoint. That's due to Android, newer version of Android Studio, and they changed this default code, automatically. They changed the default code to, to be slightly different than what it did in the previous version.